Hi, I'm Jen. Welcome to my channel. Today I wanted to do a video about electrolytes, and I think they're super important, and I don't think they get enough attention, especially when we're talking about eating habits and body functions and the how important it is. So for me, I recognize the importance. Like I used to associate electrolytes, like if I were to work out. I had a very physical job as a letter carrier. So like on those days in the hot summer, that's when we had electrolytes. But outside of that, I didn't have electrolytes, but I didn't realize like I'd be walking for 3 to 4 hours a day. That's hard on your body. And we associate electrolytes when we go above and beyond what our body is expected of. So it's odd that like experiencing depression, I've experienced abuse, and I've talked to therapists and I've talked to doctors about both these things, and not once have electrolytes been brought into it. And for me, it took me a minute to recognize this, but like you got to think. So like you lose electrolytes every time you cry, every time you sweat. So if you're having hormonal imbalances that are causing you to sweat and have hot spells, that's not always premenopausal or menopausal. We'll get into that later. If you're drinking, if you're living off of caffeine, if you're compensating with like sweets because you're sad, you know, and because your life is not what you wanted it to be, and like that's how we kind of bring in the sun, is with sweets. And you could be numbing out with alcohol. So alcohol, sugar, and caffeine are all diuretics. So that's going to be, your system is going to be pulling, from what I understand, pulling liquids from your body and getting them out to clean out these like toxins, right? From what I understand. And so, and then you got to think, so like what also happens is, so when you get really thirsty and you drink too much water, if you don't have electrolytes in that water, you're actually putting stress on your kidneys, because it's like a filtering system. But this salts, from what I understand, like the water takes the salts to the cells. I'm not sure about all the science. If you're here for science, you're in the wrong place. I'm just associating different things, like why I was so tired and run down. And then I was trying to, I knew my body was tired. I was losing my hair, and you know, my skin was not what it used to be. And you know, it was really hard for me to build my muscles again after the abuse. And after I had a time out of rest, I was trying to rebuild myself. And this is when I noticed these things where it's just like, why is this so challenging for me to build muscle? Why am I so tired? And the thing is like these electrolytes are your building blocks, but nobody ever talks to them about us. What we do get talked about is like, eat healthy meat, you know, eat your vegetables and eat your fruits, you know, and healthy fats. They talk about all those things, but that's kind of a vague blanket of like, you know, they say if you eat these things, you should be okay. But what if you're in deficit? What if you're depleted? What if your system is your nervous system is shot, you're stressed out? And so for me, one of the things I recognized too was I was so bloated. And so anytime I would eat these things, I would, even when I ate food, I would bloat. And I thought that I was gluten insensitive or intolerant. And I thought I was dairy. Now dairy, I'm going to do a different video about that. But so I stopped eating the sugar, but I still couldn't eat dairy, and I couldn't eat breads. And even sometimes I would get the meat. I couldn't handle meat. Like I couldn't get you know, that plate that Food Canada says, or I'm in Canada, but they tell you got to eat this food. Like, I'm like, that food is not fitting in my stomach. So I'm like, how am I going to get my nutrients? And then even with supplements, some of these supplements don't break down in your system, so you're not absorbing them. And even if they did, were capable of breaking down in your system, you got to think, when my system is bloated, that's, for me, like it's an irritation. Something is not like it's irritated, right? It's causing friction. And for me, so like if my gut is inflamed and irritated, it's not going to be able to absorb the nutrients, because it's working on, I think, like, now I'm not a doctor, or a nutritionist, but from what I understand from my rounds and rounds of this, is like when my system is low like that, like it's impossible to absorb the nutrients that I'm putting into it, right? And then what I also recognize is like that bloating can also be a sign like you don't have enough chloride in your stomach to break down the food or the supplements to be able to absorb them too. And then you also got to recognize if you're bloating and your bathroom patterns are constipation and slow results, like there's an idea that after you consume, there's a time where that should be exited. And so like if that's not on track, like all these things can be like your gut's off too. So like if your gut is off, then is that absorbing these things, these nutrients that you need? And so I had to look at instead of like looking at foods on a plate and like trying to eat all that food, I also had to look at the energy I was expending in a day. Like when I was depressed and when I took time off for myself, I was so tired that I was laying down the majority of my day. So that's bed rest. So if you look at the calories required for, I'm 46, so a woman of 46, it's about 1,600 to 2,400, I think, or maybe 2,000 to 2,400 based on your activity levels. But if you look at somebody on bed rest, from what I remember, if I remember correctly, it's like 1,100 calories, right? And that those are meant to be mostly protein because you can get a muscle breakdown. Like I think that's muscle atrophy. And so then you got like when you don't think of these things and recognize them because you're so focused on like what you've just experienced, maybe you're thinking about how you're going to bring money in, how you're going to pay your bills, you're looking at like you're in survival mode. Like how am I going to live? And so you don't think of the details. When you're in survival mode, that's emotional mode. And so you got to get to the logical side of things where you can start counting the numbers. And that's when I rested, when I learned how to rest instead of jump back up into the rat race in the same cycle. When I rested, I was opening myself up for receiving answers. And some of the answers were like, look at your numbers. 1,100 calories, you're eating, you're trying to consume, we'll say about 1,800 calories. That doesn't make sense. No wonder your body is bloating. But then also I was depleted in my my electrolytes, so I didn't have that chloride in my stomach to break it down to absorb it, right? And I just come out of a stressful environment, so my nerves and everything were on the fritz, so I needed to rest my system in order to say like I'm okay, and like to be able to rest and receive. And so then I also looked at like coming out of one of these situations, because I've experienced this a number of times. I did come to the realization that because I was so tired I couldn't even do dishes. I decided to get a checkup, and I realized I was so low. I was low iron anemia, and so I had to get IV for my to get that back up. And here's another thing is like, so doctors don't talk to me about electrolytes, and they also don't like. And some of this seems like common sense. Like when you get your period, you lose electrolytes as well. So you're losing electrolytes through your period. Heavy periods, I think, is associated with stress and abuse. And I don't know that I'm just wondering about that. And then we got to think, I've done a lot of crying, a lot of grieving, a lot of crying. I've had a couple cups of caffeine recently, but it's not something I really removed that for a few months. I don't eat sugar. And so I've removed those diuretics, and because those, anytime you have to like excrete like through tears, through sweat, through urine, those are all electrolytes being exited through your body. So if you're bloated and you're not absorbing your electrolytes and you're not putting them back into your body, that's going to put you in a deficit, is what I'm trying to say. And so another thing is looking at the iron intake as well, because I believe that's important too. But nobody told me, and like I said, I was trying to get to is like, you'd think it'd be common sense that like you're about to hit your period, so you should probably try to up your iron, from what I understand, right? Because I haven't talked to a doctor about this, a nutritionist. So this is just stuff that I'm like observing and putting out there as a potential causes, and some of these things have helped me to get to where I'm going. But I just don't have the receipts for it. Like I don't have like I don't have blood work, and I don't, except for the iron situation. I do have a doctor that helped me with that. And that same doctor, here's the thing too with the bloating, I went and got an endoscope and a colonoscopy done. Not as bad as you think. And nothing. No, I didn't have anything wrong with my digestion, my digestive tract, or my stomach. But they can't tell acid levels by those, and they can't tell gut flora from those either, right? So those are missing numbers, right? So I had to think, like, just because my doctor says that, you know, everything looks good in there, they can't calculate if you have good gut flora, and they can't tell like the acidity of your stomach from that. And so those are missing calculations as to why you could still be tired. And so I'm looking at taking probiotics, but these ones are fermented fruits and vegetables in a pill. And I'm making some sauerkraut, like my own, because like there's like a form of probiotics that is dairy based. And so if you're sensitive to dairy, for me, I'm thinking that could cause more bloating. And so I've opted, like I said, I don't have any results from this or scientific, you know, research. It's just from me thinking like this makes sense for me, because I do get bloating from dairy, but not so much from like, you know, the hard cheeses that are based with, you know, sheep's milk and unpasteurized dairy product. It's the pasteurized stuff where they remove a lot of the good stuff, from what I understand. And so you got to think also, so with your iron, what they also don't mention is like, yes, they're like thinking if you're going to lose some for your period, you probably want to, you know, double up or whatever you think is appropriate for that. But there's different, calculating your iron intake is different as well, because they'll be like, oh, you know, your hair's falling out, just take iron. Oh, you have heavy periods, just take iron. And it may even tell you what normal iron levels look like. But what no one's ever said to me until I started looking it up was like the way you absorb iron is very different. So non-heme iron is plant-based and needs to be absorbed or consumed with vitamin C in order to help that for the intake of the iron. Like I said, I'm not a nutritionist or doctor. I have the research. I don't have it all in front of me. So you're just gonna have to either do your own research. That makes sense. You don't want to take what I'm saying. Like, this is what has worked for me. I'm not saying it's going to work for everybody. It's just something I think it's important to bring focus to. And then so heme iron is animal product. And so like that would be like oysters are really high in that, mussels are really high in that. And so the difference is like heme iron, when you consume, like say it says 20% of your iron intake, and it gives you like whatever that number is, that number, you now have to calculate that at 25 to 40%. That's all you're going to absorb of that number on the can. And then non-heme iron is like 15 to 25%. And that's also only if you include vitamin C with that. So it's interesting because also you're not meant to consume calcium at the same time as iron, because the calcium and the iron fight in your system for absorption rights. I guess is how you would explain it. So that's odd that we've been suggesting to eat, you know, chocolate or like dark chocolate because of the iron, because like where's the vitamin C in the chocolate bar to absorb that iron? And then there's also calcium, a level I would think of calcium, because there is some sort of milk chocolate from what I understand, I think, and I could be wrong with that because it could just be fat, but it's something to think of, like if that's where you're thinking you're getting your iron from, like make sure that you're getting it with vitamin C. So looking at all these things and like recognizing, so like here I was trying to consume my proteins, my fats, and what else? Protein, fats, and watching my carbs, and that was on my radar. Those were my numbers, but what I didn't realize is I was actually having to look at, like, am I consuming my electrolytes? So when I have my electrolytes, which is the foundation, then I'm making sure that I have my proteins and my fats and my carbs, and then I'm also going to make sure my gut flora is able to take, you know, to help with all that. Like I said, I don't know all the processes. It's just, it makes sense to me. But it's like a system together. So like, and electrolytes help break down when you're eating things into your body. And then, you know, the gut flora, I think, is like, it helps the absorption as well through your intestines. That's what I understand. So you can see all these things, like if you just stop short, this is what I refer to as settling. And I'm going to do another video about settling in different areas of life. But if you would have just settled with a label, a diagnosis, an illness, and this is what I'm talking about, is people will say, well, you're premenopausal, you know, or you have heavy periods because of this. And sometimes I wonder, like, stress causes a lot of things. And like, also, you know, they'll tell you to have the iron, but they don't, if you can't absorb the iron, then what is the point of eating the iron, right? And so we got to make sure that whatever the vessel that we're putting things into can absorb it and receive it. So you need to be in receiving energy. And what that looks like is saying, like, you know, I'm accepting this, and now my body's going to be able to take everything. And it's like a well-oiled machine, because like your stomach, you got the chloride in there to help break things down, and then it goes through the system, which is receiving the nutrients instead of fighting the nutrients, right? So like, it's interesting, because it kind of like a, you know, survival mode and thriving mode is very different. So like, when you start to put these building blocks in place, you can move more into thriving mode, because you're receiving the energy that you need. Instead, before, where you're survival mode, you're living off caffeine, sugar, refined carbs, and you're just trying to keep your head above water. When you switch it, now you can thrive and you can rest. Because the thing is, if you don't have your magnesium, your muscles can't rest, and then you can't work out because your muscles aren't repaired with the potassium, I think, is what they do too. And so all these things are working together. But if you're missing a puzzle piece, and that's the thing too, is like, if you feel the need to drink caffeine, for when you're doing too much, and you need to prioritize, and you also need to look at B12. And B12 is another one I'm trying to work on too, because it's hard to, from what I understand, and I don't know, I haven't gotten to all the information on this, and I know you can get it in a needle, and I'm not great with needles, but it might be something I have to do. But I'm focusing on other things first. And even when I crouch my foot, I can feel when I bend my foot, I'm getting that Charlie horse feeling. So that tells me potassium. Even though I've had 2 bananas today, I need more potassium, because I just started working out again. And the thing is, when you don't work out, like walking is one thing, and it's not nothing, but it's just the bare minimum. And so like, if I'm feeling pain from that, then I need to look at where my deficits, right? And so those, I know when I bend my foot and lock it, that can be from potassium, but I also know that I also need my vitamin C. And I forget exactly why, but yesterday I knew my vitamin C I needed. So I'm just looking for signs of this, and it's all like trial and error. You know, you just look for signs. Like for me, and even I think I need more fish oils, because I find I'm struggling with my eyesight. And I remember I'm following this guy on YouTube, and he's saying like the fish oils can affect, because it's like fluid. And you got to think, it makes me think like that's where the sodium also comes in too, because from what I understand, like that brings the water to all the different aspects of your body, I think. And so like, these things seem like they're so important, but yet they haven't been pushed out. And then you got to also think like, so you don't, Gatorade has a lot of sugar and sucralose and all these things. So the one electrolyte I do actually am really liking right now is the LMNT, because it has a high level of sodium. And your levels of sodium, I think, are 1,500 on the low end, and on the high end, like, you know, your min to max is like 2,500. So one packet has 1,000. And table salt, like sea salt, has like, for a quarter of a teaspoon, it's only like 330 milligrams, when you need 1,500 to 2,500. And if you're depleted, now this is where I would be careful, because like, I'm not a doctor. And so for me, I gradually try to build these up with not only just supplements, but I'm also, when you include more real food in your life, like that's gonna get your norm. But then I also supplement until I can get myself back to like level with things. And now I try not to do certain capsules, don't break down. So I look, when I'm ordering my pills on Amazon or wherever I'm ordering them, I look to see that they come apart, like they're in the gel caps and not like that compacted pill, even though my potassium chloride ones are compacted. They're meant for time release. And you have to be careful with taking those because you can take too much. And so I try to get a lot of mine through animal products because that's the most you know, it's the closest to us in our makeup is what I understand and what I believe. And so I also use tallow for my lotions, like for my face, because like even jojoba oil and that is nice, but tallow is the closest thing to our sebum. And like I said, I don't know if I'm getting all the terms right, but that's just what I use. And it feels the best for me. Anyways, so animal, I got the spleen for the vitamin Bs. And I'm also adding, so before remember I talked about having refined carbs and things, like I still want carbs. I don't want to just be carnivore. So I'm trying to find out like how to get my carbs that have proteins in them as well. So like, what is it? Not legumes, lentils. Have high protein and they have a lot of good things in them, and for me I like them texturally, and I'm going to start making some of those like cold salads with quinoa and beans and things like that. So like trying to get your carbs in, but your carbs with protein is beneficial, and then you get that extra texture as well. Because like I tried carnivore and I did really well for a long period of time, and while I was like in a deficit and I was eating junk food and I went to the other side of carnivore, I had to come back in the middle, and actually I enjoy food and I enjoy cooking, and so that's where I couldn't stay at the carnivore area. So when you start becoming aware of all these things and realizing like, so it's not just about what you put on your plate, it's like your electrolytes, so that whatever you're putting in your body, it can break that down and absorb it and then take it where it needs to go. And recognizing when you're in a deficit and what makes a deficit, like I said, being like a lot of crying, diuretics like sugar, caffeine, alcohol, refined carbs. These are all like cause issues with like releasing too many electrolytes and then needing to replace them. Even like I said, drinking too much. So not only are you drinking like a diuretic in a cup that could be either sugary or caffeinated, you got to think, how large is that container of water? Like, do you actually need that? And then the thing is too, like when I would drink these things, I would fill myself up on those and I would no longer be hungry. And I didn't want to be hungry because, to be honest, I didn't want to make the food. I was too tired to make the food. And then I'm like caffeine. So the caffeine says I don't have enough B12 vitamins, and that's where I kind of picked up on. And that's where the beef spleen is supposed to be helpful, but also beef liver is helpful with that. So yeah, I'm just learning how to balance these, try to recognize when I'm short on one, but also recognizing where so when you start balancing your system out, I used to be cold all the time before, and it's when I actually started taking the sodium where I recognized that my body temperatures were leveling out. But what happens now is like, and I Googled this as well, like this is all Google. I'm just doing the best that I can with Google because I just don't have access and money. So I'm just trying to do the best I can for myself. And I started overheating. So now I notice, like before I had like 2 comforters on my bed because I would be so cold at night. And now I'm like, I'll wake up and I'm sweating because I'm just too warm. I don't need those 2 blankets. And I've turned my hydro down because it's just too hot. So like, it's interesting because from what I understand is like when you balance your body out like that, now your metabolism is kicking in. And so that can take some time to balance that out as well. And so you can see how all these different reasons for hot flashes may not be based on your period or being a woman. You know what I mean? It could be like, I would get, when I would eat, certain times after I would eat, I would get really hot. Like they call it, I think, the meat sweats and stuff like that. So like, that's what I associate. Like, and so even though I was on carnivore diet and they're like, that's when I started having more electrolytes because I wasn't having anything else. And they say, you got to have electrolytes in order to poop while you're on carnivore and just to live. but I got to think, like, even when I was on carnivore, I was getting all the nutrients of the meat and stuff like that. But that electrolyte that I was taking, like, I was still short, because before I went on to carnivore, I didn't have sodium or the electrolytes per se, right? So it's just interesting, like all these different things, and you don't think about all these numbers because you're so caught up in survival mode and the emotions, right? And the mean girls and the creepy guys and the egotistical bosses who lack experience but, you know, have been given a power position. So like that's where once I separate myself from those, I gave myself a period of time to rest and recover. Not only was I able to now implement the numbers and pay attention to them more, I'm moving more into the thriving era because I'm relaxing, I'm receiving, and I'm getting more answers as I do this. And things are putting, puzzles are coming together, pieces are being put together, and it's helping me move into a direction outside of the survival sort of poverty mindset and more into the thriving. So I hope this is helpful for you to be aware of like how to calculate the numbers when you're trying to recover from the abuse, because I don't think these numbers are implemented into the daily, you know, intake, and you know, they're not being talked about in the doctor's offices, and it's not being brought up, and it's being kind of swept under the rug or just generally thrown at you to go take, you know, this or that. But it's like, where are the building blocks of my health? Like, why are we not focused on that? Why is the doctor not saying, you know, when I'm depressed, and depression is associated with sleeping long periods of time, why isn't my doctor and crying, like crying is associated with depression, I would think, because you're feeling low. You know, when I told my doctor I've experienced, like, you know, when I went to my therapist and explained what I've been through, she never once talked about electrolytes. You know, I'm crying in her office. I don't like crying in front of people. And so like, if I'm crying right in front of her there, why is she not associating, like, you know what, like, these people are missing. That's what I mean. Like, some people can go to school, but they're missing the experience. And it's like, you know what, if you knew what this looked like on the other side of the person that you're talking to, then you could get that perspective flip of realizing, like, what does this person's life actually look like? Oh, they're crying a lot, they're drinking caffeine a lot, they're eating sugar a lot, these items have this in them. Like, nobody's talking about this. And so that's why I think it's important for this message. So if you're tired, this could be one of the reasons why you're tired. And so hopefully that was helpful. Be sure to like and subscribe, because I'm putting my channel together to, it's a perspective shift, like being on the other side of things, and also getting more clarity and information on why we're reacting the way we are. And a lot of this is based in abuse and things like that as well, and how to overcome it and work through it. So yeah, if you enjoyed this content, be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. And I hope this helps. And let me know if you find that this helps. Like, the idea is to get more numbers and statistics on, like, if you find that this is something that you got positive results, I'd love to hear about that. And if you have any information to add to this community in the comments about your experience, like, you know, I found that help too, or I found that outcome too, or, you know, like, let people know that this is something that we need to be talking about to get it more out there, to help other people. We need to build our community stronger. And I do believe, like, our health is our wealth. And so, like, if you're not healthy, how are you going to be wealthy? That you need consistent long-term gain. And like, if you don't have that in your health, how are you going to do that with your wealth? Okay, so I'll see you in the next one, and thank you for your support and your views, and I'll see you in the next one, and take care.